Hey, this is Carl Leobson at the University of Arizona, and I want to talk to you for a few minutes today about internalizing and externalizing behavior and why it's important that we consider the difference between internalizing behaviors and externalizing behaviors. First, let me tell you about a study that was done probably a dozen or more years ago by some researchers, and they wanted to see whether or not kids in schools received services to help them out before they ended up in an adolescent psychiatric drug and alcohol treatment facility. So that what they found out when they looked at the records of kids in the treatment facility, looked at their school records, was that some kids received special education services, remained in school, but eventually ended up in the treatment facility. So some kids got a lot of assistance to try to keep them in the school before they ended up in the treatment facility. They also found that some kids immediately went to the treatment facility. All right? But they didn't find that it was just randomly. They found that it was very predictable. The kids who would receive help in school before they would end up in a psychiatric or drug and alcohol treatment facility, and the kids who really didn't get any help in school before they immediately went to a treatment facility. What do you think that group of kids was? In fact, these researchers could walk into a room and just look around the room and point at people and be able to tell who had received assistance and who had not received assistance in school before going to a treatment facility. What do you think the difference is in those kids that they could just look out in a room and see? You know what it is? Boys almost always received services in schools before ending up in a residential or a adolescent drug and alcohol or psychiatric treatment facility. Girls invariably did not. Now, these researchers had lots of reasons that they supposed that this might be the case. But here's one of them, that the boys were more externalizers and engaged in behaviors that were hard to ignore within the school, and that more of the girls engaged in internalizing behaviors that were more likely to be ignored within the school. But what exactly are these internalizing and externalizing behaviors? So let's take a look at these. Externalizing behaviors are those really easily visible outward expressions of behavior that teachers find really annoying. Internalizing behaviors are less easy to see and inwardly directed expressions of behavior. So externalizing behaviors, the kid who, when the teacher says it's time to do work, kid stands up, throws a chair, and says, "I'm not doing any of this stuff." Internalizing behaviors, when the teacher says it's time to do work, is the kid who sits in the back of the room, pulls the coat over their head, and starts to pick at their arm until it bleeds. Which kid is likely to get the attention of the teacher right away? Let's take a look at some other examples of internalizing and externalizing behavior. Now here's a list, and this list actually comes from various surveys, behavioral surveys, of externalizing and internalizing behavior. Let's see if we can pick out what's externalizing and what's internalizing. Exhibits painful shyness. Internalizing, right? Violates the basic rights of others. Externalizing. Is teased by peers. Internalizing. Is depressed. Internalizing. Has tantrums. Those are kind of outward and large. Violates societal norms and rules. Probably externalizing. Although you can see how some of these might fit in either category, can't you? It also is not to say that a child fits neatly in one category or another. Children, and we all, exhibit combinations. But the issue is which of these types of behaviors is more likely to receive attention and more likely for us to bring the teacher to engage in. Right? Is neglected by peers. Internalizing, uses lewd or obscene language. Sure, I'd go with externalizing. Demonstrates obsessions. Probably internalizing. I'm going to leave you to determine the rest of these. You might want to shut off the video for just a second, and when you look at these and try and determine for yourself whether they're externalizing or internalizing, and when you start the video again, I will show you what my choices were. Alright, so here are my choices. Again, you could see how some of these might fit in either externalizing or internalizing. And again, it's not to say that a child fits neatly into one category or another. The real purpose here is this. We really tend to the needs of externalizers much more than the needs of internalizers. It's so easy for teachers, general education teachers, special education teachers, and other professionals in school settings to pay attention to the kids who are the squeaky wheel rather than the kid who sits in the back of the room and is suffering from any number of range of problems that are expressed in an internalizing fashion. Don't forget our kids who are internalizers. Don't forget our kids with depression and eating disorders and anxiety disorders who don't disrupt our classrooms but are just as much at risk in their lives. Big message: you can distinguish between internalizers and externalizers, but distinguish between them to make sure that you don't leave out the internalizers.